So the Buckeyes once again left licking their wounds after a loss in a top 5 showdown. As we welcome in Tony Gerdeman from BuckeyeHuddle.com. Gerd, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
I suppose the one hand you look at and it's another loss to a top 5 opponent. Another hand, they didn't play their best. They only lost by 1. There were some positives out of that loss to Oregon.
Yeah, I think some of the positives were the fact that throughout periods of the game, it looked like Ohio State was trying to hang on for dear life, and then they hung on and then would get a lead back. And, they kept both teams going back and forth and overcoming one piece of adversity and then dealing with something else and capitalizing. So I thought just the fact that they fought, traded punches, threw the ball well. There are some positives there. But at some points, it also felt like as they were hanging on for dear life, that Oregon left some points out there as well.
The other big news coming out of this game, not only the loss, but the loss of Josh Simmons, starting left tackle, believed to be perhaps done for the year. Certainly it's going to be a significant time that Simmons will be missing from the Buckeye offensive line. Who does Ohio State turn to fill in that gap at left tackle?
Yeah, I'm going to ask you the same thing, Mark. Yeah, that's a great question. Who do you think it's going to be? Because it could be any number of guys. I think Justin Fry, offensive line coach, they always talk about going with their best 5. And so I think Austin Siereveld has shown that he's the next guy up, which means if you put in Austin Siereveld, who do you put at left tackle? And it's interesting that when Simmons went down, Luke Montgomery immediately was put on the field in the huddle. And the way they were stationed in the huddle, it was Montgomery at left guard and Donovan Jackson at left tackle. So is that something that I don't know that it would be Luke Montgomery. It'd probably still be Austin Siereveld if Tigger Shabola is healthy enough, and he should be. So then do they want to go with Donovan Jackson at left tackle? And I remember that being an option last year when Kevin Wilson, the year before, the offensive coordinator at Ohio State, mentioned Donovan Jackson as a possibility at left tackle back in 2022. So is this something that they look at this week and into next? They've got some time. So I think you'll see perhaps Donovan Jackson there. They'll see if, Zen Mahalski was the guy that went in and played the entirety at that spot once Josh Simmons went down. They'll probably give him a chance in practice. I'm sure they will, and they'll see how he does. Austin Siereveld played it in fall camp, played left tackle. Tigger Shabola has been a tackle before in his career. Do they kick him out to the left side? Do they put Josh Fryer out at left tackle? He was the left tackle in spring last year. So, yeah, to answer your question, I don't know. They've got some options, but none of them are ideal. So they have to figure out who is the most ideal of those options. And as I said earlier, the thing that they always try to rely on is put your best 5 out there and then fit those 5 in the spots that they fit best. And, is that Tigger Shabola at left tackle? Is it Donovan Jackson at left tackle? Is it Justin Fryer or Josh Fryer? Is it Austin Siereveld? Mark, I don't know. And we won't talk to Ryan Day this week. So when we do talk to him next week, we'll have a bit better idea of what they're thinking, how they've done it. And I would be shocked if a bunch of different guys didn't get looks.
Yeah, and that's interesting because if you go back to the Iowa game, Luke Montgomery did not play against the Hawkeyes, leading some speculation that perhaps they were going to hold him out, redshirt him this season, preserve a year of eligibility, move Montgomery to center because Seth McLaughlin, he's only got the 1 year of eligibility, but now that might be out the window because they're going to have to figure out ways to win some football games moving forward. Will Howard taking a lot of heat for his decision-making in that final possession, it's not quite fair to say an up and down game for Will Howard because it was mostly up, but certainly that last slide cost Ohio State.
Yeah, watching it live, first of all, I don't know how you can fault somebody for completing 80% of their passes, 326 yards, 2 touchdowns, rushed for a touchdown. But watching it on the field in those final seconds, as soon as he took off, that in my mind was the end of the game because there just wasn't going to be enough time to get down, to get a timeout. And even as people have freeze framed everything now, and you can see once he starts sliding, the play is over. You see Brandon Ennis calling timeout, and there's still a second on the clock. Could they have reviewed it? Perhaps. Were there 8,000 fans on the field by that point? Yes. Were they going to be able to get everybody off the field? No. And so it's just the bang nature of it. You're just asking a lot, and that's why taking off as he said, I needed to get down a little bit earlier, just 1 second earlier, if you will. But even then, is that going to be enough time for the refs to make a call? And if the clock still strikes zero when there should have been 2 seconds on the clock, are they going to be able to clear the fans off the field at that point? Yeah. So it's once he took off, once he didn't get rid of the ball, that was essentially the game, and it's certainly a very very tough way to lose it. They had time at the end until they didn't, and that's when it's going to stick with him and the rest of the team for a while. But overall, I think Will Howard did just about everything you could do to win that game, and they still came up a little bit short.
Urban Meyer in the past has talked about when he was coach, he would find the dead fish on the field, and that's who they would attack offensively. Well, Oregon and Dan Lanning found their dead fish in Denzel Burke. How does Ohio State's cornerback bounce back from a very disappointing performance against the Ducks?
Yeah, well, and the thing about cornerbacks is they're supposed to have no memory. They're supposed to have amnesia. This one's going to be tough for him to forget, especially if nobody lets him forget it. But he's going to have another opportunity, probably against Oregon down the road. This doesn't have to define him. Just about every great cornerback at Ohio State has had a game similar to this. And whether you talk about Nate Clements, Antoine Winfield, other players where it's just what wasn't their day, and they got attacked, and taken advantage of. And so it's happened to very good players over their careers. I think what was interesting in this one is that Dylan Gabriel is doing stuff that he had not done all season long, which is the downfield passing to the right side of the field. So I think in some instances give Oregon credit, but I think Denzel Burke and the game plan was not up to speed, or up to snuff, basically, on why, or the way that Oregon was going to attack. And then the ability to react and stop it wasn't there either. Ohio State had given up 0 30-yard passes this season, and I think they gave up 4 in this one, and a handful of them were from Burke down the field. And he shouldn't be allowing that. I think his eyes were in the backfield a little bit too much. So certainly correctable stuff that he's going to see and know what he did wrong, and next time you've got to execute, and if you don't, the same thing can happen.
Ohio State, they've got this week off, so they're going to be focusing on just getting better while everybody else can start maybe looking ahead and projecting where Ohio State might end up. Now, as you alluded to, perhaps a rematch with Oregon, maybe in Indianapolis, maybe in the college football playoff. But I think one thing that is clear that maybe certainly some people are hinting at in the summer, it might be better to finish 5th in the playoff picture than to finish in the top 4, because you look at some of the projections right now. Ohio State at 5th, hosting either maybe a Navy or a Boise State before taking on BYU in the second round. That might be a little better path going forward for Ohio State.
Yeah, whenever you look at these projections, you can look at that 5 seed and think, that doesn't look too bad. And you get that, as you said, you get that home game against the 12, and you can see a path forward generally for that 5 seed. The only downside is having to play that extra game, but yeah, the breaks that the 5 seed get have been interesting over all of these projections. And it's one thing for one projection to give an interesting look, but when you just continue to see this after over and over and again, and that 12 seed is there, and then the next round looks favorable as well, there are worse paths, I believe, to the championship game than the 5th seed.
Obviously, Ohio State's going to want to win out, but are they also maybe hoping for a little help so they don't make it to the Big Ten championship game, get that week off? Because if you get to the Big Ten championship game, you want to win that game, obviously, but then that locks you into one of the top 4 bids, and you're not going to be in that 5 spot.
Yeah, I think we're going to find over the next year or two the benefits of making it and not making it to a conference championship game, and the expense of that. Um, and in terms of like the college football playoff, my hope is that teams won't be penalized for making it to the game and then losing. I think you should be rewarded for making it to the game. I wouldn't want to see a team that loses in that game and now has one more loss than the 3rd place team in the conference suddenly get jumped by that 3rd team in the conference. There should be a point of emphasis, and one of those data points that they talk about that gives credit to making a championship game. But yeah, I mean, There, the advantages of getting that week off. It's not unlike the college basketball tournament where, oh, you didn't have to play Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you got some time off. Gosh, that was very fortunate. You got your legs under you. You got refreshed. I sure did. And we've seen it, time and time again where the team with the fresh legs wins it. But ultimately, in basketball, and I believe the same thing in football, it's about the matchups and getting hot at the right time. And so, losing a game 6 of the year, you still have the second half of the season, and then the postseason. So I think from here, Ohio State can continue to just go up and focus on what they've done wrong, what they do well, and what they have not done well, do better. Ultimately, though, that defense against top opponents needs to get off the field in the fourth quarters.
Ohio State off this week. Their next opponent is Nebraska. The Cornhuskers travel to undefeated Indiana this weekend, as the Hoosiers might have something to say about who is in Indianapolis in the Big Ten championship game when all is said and done. I want to thank our guest, Tony Gerdeman from BuckeyeHuddle.com. Gerd, thank you once again.
Thank you for having me.